Hey everyone, and welcome to the May edition of 3030. I am your host, Pat Reinhardt. We are in week 11 of the quarantine. It's May, I think. I don't know anymore. What day is it? Thursday, Monday, Sunday? Hey, whatever, man. Happy you guys were able to join me today. So, few things that we're going to be talking about. One of the big things, of course, is the May 2020 core algorithm update. We're going to talk what we're seeing on our side at Conductor, what people are also talking about in the field that I have gathered from conversations. Really interesting stuff there. I think Google broke some stuff, but we'll see what happens. Also going to talk about Google's no-follow link change. We actually covered this a few months ago, that back starting in March, they were going to change something about how the no-follow link attribute was looked at. So just an update on that. Also have been talking to a lot of folks have been seeing Google de-indexing, some portions of their site. John Mueller came back with a humorous response as always as to why that could possibly be. Probably nothing major there, but something good to talk about. And then more COVID-related type things is that, Google started to charge a backfill reviews in Google My Business, so we'll talk about that. But also, folks that may not have known this, when you mark your site temporarily closed, that actually changes, what's available to folks on mobile device, for how they can contact you. So let's get into all that because we only have 30 minutes. The number one thing that everyone is talking about right now is the May 2020 core algorithm update, which, again, this is SEMrush's sensor, and you can see that right on that date, there was a huge, huge burst. And if you look at all the other tools out there, Modcast, et cetera, you will see the same spike on that day. So we all know that something happened. The big thing is that I think Google broke something because we started to see a lot of weird stuff. So unlike a lot of the other, updates, we started to see a lot of weird shifts during this one. One of the biggest things that a lot of people saw and a lot of people were commenting on is the rise of Pinterest. Pinterest was the winner in almost everything, but it's all mixed up in the wrong databases. So there's actually a couple of screenshots out there of Pinterest showing up for several different of their country-level domains showing up. But also just a huge, huge spike. Like, for example, Pinterest China with a 66% increase, for a lot of terms that didn't really make sense for Pinterest to show up on. So that was something so a lot of people were saying that whatever Google did this time around was kind of broken. And, we saw also a lot of older threads. Glenn Gabe was talking about a lot of older threads that dropped in ranking. So meaning that threads from like 2010, 11, 12, just like older content started to drop down. So that's something to note and something to check on. That's something that I haven't seen a lot of in our customer database. I went through a couple of hundred sites just looking at older threads, and I didn't really see, anything that equated to, older content dropping, but there were a lot of people who responded to Glenn and said that they were seeing the same thing, that a lot of their older content had started to drop. Now, that could come back to Google deeming it not as relevant because it's older, so that's something to keep in mind. Or something that's out of date could be medical content or financial content that's out of date. So that's something to think of as well. And going back to the medical and the financial aspect, to the surprise of absolutely no one, this was yet another algorithm update that most folks are saying that had a big YMYL focus on it, or again, your money or your life. So all the terms that have to do with your financial or medical well-being. Guys, I gotta be completely honest with you. I'm kind of tired of talking about this. This is kind of why I stopped reporting on algorithms updates, is because they really are all just focused on the same thing. When you look at all the different analyses that are out there, and I looked into ours, we saw a big shift on the financial side this time, just like the last one. Medical sites, we work with a ton of medical sites. I didn't see a ton of movement on our medical sites, and they're fairly large ones. So, nothing majorly gained, nothing majorly lost. Again, a lot of folks said that there was a huge correlation into fitness sites, and also some health-related sites and some financial sites. I saw the financial aspect of it. I did not see the medical aspect of it. Lily Ray, who always does a really cool rundown, you should go check her rundown on pathinteractive.com. She she also saw this as well. So that's always good. One other observation that she had that was really interesting was that, and she was citing someone else, is that a lot of the core impact had a big impact on sites with user-generated content. Again, so I went back, and so again, and that kind of goes back to what Glenn was talking about with older, about older forum posts and older things that have to do with forums, and a lot of those threads dropping. A lot of people, and then I started to dig around, and a lot of people were saying that they did see a shift in forum content, or help content, support content that's usually user-generated, help type content, and that older versions of that content saw a big dip there. Now, that's something that I went in, again, I saw slight dips here and there for folks that could be considered in that realm, but I didn't see anything major there. I saw the biggest shift in financial, and mainly in financial aggregator type sites. And that's something that we've been, reporting on regularly as well, that we've seen, the same type of stuff there. But at the end of the day, we did see that. Another thing that I noticed that a lot of people in my, saw as well was a lot of SERPs looking like this, that just had every single type of universal result that you could absolutely think of crammed onto one SERP. And it's, and I started to search around, I probably searched around 500 terms, honestly, and I saw this all over the place. Terms that where I felt that local pack listings had no business being, at all. And also just a lot of shopping, a lot of weird SERPs. And that was something that everyone kind of universally agreed on, is that whatever this update did, or whatever it was, pointed at, again, it's a core algorithm update, it focuses on a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of people saw a lot of weird SERP results, and meaning that there's just a lot of different elements on SERPs for terms that I don't feel like really made a lot of sense. Again, Pinterest coming up all over the place doesn't make sense for a lot of these terms. You had in some cases you had 5 or 6 results from different Pinterest sites from all around the world. Really strange, really didn't make a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, that's something that we were seeing. So again, just to recap, May Core 2020 algorithm update. Again, a lot of YMYL type stuff that should surprise absolutely nobody. We saw a lot of financial aggregator type sites get hit the worst on our end, and that's going through a bunch of them. Didn't see as much medical stuff, but saw some, but not a ton, not as much as some other folks were. But the main weirdness that we saw, or at least I saw on my side, was a lot of universal results coming up for terms that I believe didn't necessarily necessitate the types of results that were coming up. A lot of weird SERPs. So that's something to look into, just to see what the landscape is and what type, result types are showing up for a lot of queries. I wouldn't be surprised that you'll see more shopping results there, more local pack results there, more Pinterest results, because Pinterest is now everywhere. So I wouldn't be surprised that in the next few days, or in the next few weeks, that you will probably see Google roll back on this, because Danny Sullivan actually wrote back and was asking about the Pinterest stuff in particular, and just said that Google was aware of the Pinterest thing, quote unquote. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them dial this one back a little bit. So as I said, keep your eyes peeled. I'll certainly report back next time around, because we'll have to circle back on this after, because Google appears is definitely looking into this. But again, for the core algorithm update, that's what we saw. If you saw fluctuations up and down, and you want to talk about more, reach out to me directly. Happy to give you even more data. But in the interest of time, that's what we saw. We will move on to the next thing. So Google's no follow link change. So this was something that back on, they announced this a few months ago, before the pandemic and all that started. That starting on March 1st, Google's no follow link change, which what that was is that it stated that Google, usually would look at a no follow link attribute as a directive. It's like, look, if you put a no follow in here, they would follow that and say that they will not pass, this equity on from this, or they will not follow, they will not follow that link that you have designated as a no follow, right? And what that means is it doesn't pass equity, but Google doesn't follow. We all know that Google will crawl through it most likely, but it wouldn't pass any equity, it wouldn't pass anything through. So they came back and said that the change here is that it's actually going to be looked at, you can think of it more like a canonical tag where it's more of a handshake or more of a hint rather than a directive. Of course, this would mainly impact crawling and indexing because, again, Google now following that link would not technically follow through. But up until this point, nothing has really changed. So for us on this side, Barry Schwartz, where I had saw this, said that he actually followed up with Gary Iles over at Google on this and said, like, hey, like the no follow policy happened in March, right? Has Google actually done anything here? And Barry gave kind of like a cryptic response where he said, like, we don't have anything to announce to the best of my knowledge. The thing I'm working on will need to be announced. So you will have something at one point, sometime in the near future, no time frame. So what does that mean? Obviously, that means that they were giving us a heads up that they were doing something that, things of this nature might be, this might be that, no follow link, like no following the link doesn't mean that Google won't follow it through anymore. Again, that it will act more like a canonical tag, but Google will more than likely crawl through it and then determine for itself if the no follow, much like a canonical tag, makes sense for it to be there and then make its own determination. And that might be the change. This also might come into a play with how link equity works and things of that nature. Again, it's just something to be aware of if you use no follows frequently, or if you have a lot of no follows on your site, or you use it to control what areas of the site, or how link equity flows through the site. So just keep that in mind that, a lot of people didn't even remember that this change was happening. And I come across it and I was like, oh yeah, I had forgotten. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was supposed to go into effect in March, but hadn't really heard anything about it in a while. But this is something that I'll continue to watch and update everyone on as the months go on, because that's a little bit of a weird, thing to say that, it will need to be announced. So my guess is that it's going to be that no follow link attributes will probably act mainly like a canonical, and they will just be a hint or a handshake and not a directive. But it doesn't look like any of that's been put into place yet, but that was probably just the first step in them letting us know this was going to happen. So keep that in mind. I'll keep reporting back as time goes on this. When that's coming, again, when it is, no one knows, honestly. So just I'll keep everyone as informed as possible. So this one was interesting. Glenn Gabe was talking about, I saw this on Twitter. Glenn Gabe said that, that on around May 1st, right? John Mueller said that when he looked that usually when folks, like a lot of folks complain to him about a lot of things. If you've ever joined one of his Google, the Hangouts that he hosts, it's mainly people just trying to get time with him to ask them why they're not doing better in Google and asking his advice. And he always gives great one-liners back, but always gives sound advice as well. So from here, he actually said that, for folks who are complaining about their sites being de-indexed, it typically has to do with Google not finding enough quality on those pages. And I found this interesting just because, again, this is probably not news to a lot of folks, but I think it's good to discuss that, here's exactly what he said, is that it's usually a quality issue and less of a technical one. Now that's probably the most interesting part, because when a lot of people say Google is de-indexing my site, which is why I put this in here, they usually look to the technical side of life first. They say, oh, did I accidentally block it, with like a robots tag, or, is there something broken? Is there something wrong with my server? Things of that nature. But the interesting thing is that he then went on to say that our algorithms might be looking at that section of the site or the site overall and thinking that it doesn't make sense to index pages there. And he went on to say that it doesn't necessarily have to do with a technical issue with the site, and indexation, crawling, all that stuff, that usually falls into the technical side of life. And people usually run crawlers through the site to look for technical things that are broken with the site, but they also forget that if Google deems a piece of content low quality, that can also cause the content to be that page to be de-indexed as well. And that's something where like I was combating a few years ago with like large e-commerce sites who had who had their search result pages that were indexed. Like let's say you had you had a 100,000 page site, but only 20,000 of those pages were actual pages, and the rest were search result pages. Now, those 80,000 pages used to be, Google would just crawl and index everything. But as Google has become more advanced, and I saw this in real time, they've been working on this for years, is that, as they go through their site, they realize that when people search for something, that's actually not a quality page to serve up for any particular query. It's just a bunch of products in a search result page. And you'd rather have the category page or a product page show up, not just this slew of, different types of products. So a lot of those pages I was seeing in large swaths falling in and out of the index. And this kind of confirms that's what was happening. It really isn't about necessarily that there's something wrong with your site. Technically, there could be, but you also have to pay attention to, what type of content is on that page and what is the actual intent and the point of that page. And does that page really need to be served up for something? And that's something that a lot of people don't think about all the time. And it really goes towards like those like search result pages, paginated pages, and things of that nature that a lot of people think that we don't have, that a lot of people are just like, oh yeah, like I just want all these pages out there. But again, that comes back to a point that I've made on the program over the years is that, Google wants a more focused site. And you should always look into cutting down, the types of pages that maybe are garbage, garbage pages and, like search result pages. There's really no value there. And this kind of confirms that. And that's, that was interesting for him to hear. Again, nothing necessarily groundbreaking, but a good point to make and a good thing to think about as as you continue to make your site better, improve it, and focus it. Do you really need those search result pages in the index? Do people really want to land on it? If you were searching for a product, would you want to land on a page like that? And that's really where a lot of that stuff is happening. So, keep that in mind as you go through your site. So, back to something that is probably more timely right now is, due to like COVID, is back in March, obviously when all this horribleness started, Google stopped showing new reviews in Google My Business, due to the pandemic. And you weren't, so local businesses were closed. They weren't able to, they didn't want, and I guess like they didn't want people posting bad reviews on businesses that were already suffering. So they just stopped showing new reviews coming in, and they disabled that function. As of a little while ago, so Ben Fisher, posted around on May 13th that Google has actually been backfilling old reviews that were posted during the time, but also showing new ones. So as you can see here, even though the count wasn't updated, a review from 5 weeks ago started showing up, which means that was just during the heart of the pandemic, and that this functionality is coming back. I think that this is a good sign. As the country starts to reopen, as I think everyone knows, I live in Long Island, and yesterday was the first day that a lot of local businesses were able to start doing curbside pickup and curbside shopping and things of that nature. So and other states like Georgia, and Florida have opened a lot of areas as well. And even upstate New York has started to open. So as you're seeing signs of the pandemic slowing, or at least, counties and states and countries, testing the waters of opening back up, Google is following suit and looking into areas that they can start opening up again. I think this is a good thing. When folks, again, like all this stuff has been really tough on local businesses. And when you see signs opening up, you want to see, so for these guys, they probably want these local business owners want people to be able to do these things again, because if they are, able to somewhat run parts of their business, then they want people to be able to comment on it. So again, this sounds like, this is a good sign of things, hopefully starting to return to normal. We're still a long way away from where we were before this whole thing started, of course, but it's good to see signs of things coming back. But also, it's good to see that not all that time was necessarily lost for these local businesses. So, a lot of these reviews, I was telling a lot of folks, they're like, yeah, it sucks. Like, we could be getting reviews right now, we don't even know. And so it's good to see that they are backfilling them. I thought that they were just going to open it up again and then you'd see new reviews, but I think it's good that they had kept all the reviews that were happening and also started to backfill them as well. So again, just another sign of things opening back up, and that Google is starting to give some normalcy back to these folks. And along the same line, something else that I'm not sure a lot of people knew is when the pandemic started and Google gave you the opportunity to temporarily close your business, I don't think a lot of people actually noticed that actually took away the buttons that you can press on a phone and some of the ones that you can see in desktop as well to call the business, to get directions, to save it or bookmark it, and to go to the website. It just replaced that with the drop down that said temporarily closed. And it's interesting because a lot of folks actually brought this to my attention over the course of the last few weeks, because as they were seeing their reviews come back, they were looking and saying, like, I never even noticed that when I marked this as temporarily closed, that all those buttons went away. And the bad thing about that is that a lot of people use the push to call button on their phones, and and a lot of folks are like, yeah, I rerouted my business phone. Not that I was expecting a lot of calls, but I rerouted my business line to my cell phone, and it just has business owners wondering, did that impact the amount of calls that they could have taken in and answered, talk about things that they were doing curbside, but also like visits to their website, for local businesses, especially like restaurants who were doing curbside pickup the entire time or delivery. Did that impact traffic to their site? It 100% did. But a lot of local business owners didn't even notice, did not even notice that happened. So again, a lot of things that you're starting to see, because in the whirlwind of the pandemic, a lot of folks didn't notice a lot of this stuff, and it's just starting to come to light now that some folks do. So if you work with local businesses, something to check out. If you have them temporary closure, something to note that was happening, because I wouldn't be surprised if obviously engagement would be down regardless, but wouldn't be surprised if like some missed calls and missed traffic to the website was also part of that as well. So something just to keep in mind, something to know. And with that, we have a few questions, so I'm going to actually got through everything a little bit early today. But with that, we are almost in June, everybody, and that's really all I got. Keep staying your distance, keep safe. We're all, we're getting through this thing. I think we're in week 11. I think that's what the amount I notched in. And as I say this every month, this is my favorite part of my job. This is normal to me. This helps me, feel normal at work, and I wouldn't be able to do it without all of you. So thank you for spending your very important time with me. We have a few questions that I'm going to answer. The first one, in regards to the May 2020 update, any news on B2B or manufacturing businesses? No, actually, we work with a bunch in both, and again, didn't see a ton of fluctuation there. In where I saw anyway, for all the different ones that we went through. Some folks were reporting that manufacturing saw a lot of fluctuation, but in Conductor's data, I couldn't replicate that. So personally, I can't confirm nor deny that is true or not true. But we didn't see anything. We mainly saw them maintain for the most part. B2B. Also, again, depending on, what the industry was, again, if it's a B2B financial, firm, yeah, we saw massive fluctuations up and down in financials, from a B2B standpoint. But in other realms, we didn't really see a whole bunch go up or down. So a lot of our data was pretty static and pretty, business as usual, which I guess is a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. Next question is, you mentioned Pinterest results, shopping ads. Any movement about video? Yes, actually, good question. A lot of video results. We did see an increase in video results, but of course, mainly to YouTube. In some cases, I was looking and there was a 25 to 30% jump in YouTube results for some sites. In video, it was number one in video results. But the vast majority of those were increases in YouTube, videos, which, isn't necessarily weird or anything like that. But we did see more, and that goes back to the original point I was making about the SERPs just feeling more crowded. Video was a part of that. If you remember the first slide that I showed with the SERPs sliding up and down, a lot of that was, there were two video carousels in some cases. Some were news, but there were video carousels as well. So there was definitely a big spike about in video as well. So very good point. I should have pointed that out as well. Let's see. Your note about de-indexing is super interesting. Thank you. Our company has really dug into our sitemap to troubleshoot indexability. There were pages where we noticed discrepancies between GSC and our sitemap's indexable status. Interesting. If quality content was a contributor to this, what are steps that our team can take to start auditing? Yeah, that's a great question. I would just honestly, an interesting way that you could do something like that at scale is you could send a tool like DeepCrawl through the site and just get the word count on each page and look at pages that have like a nothing burger word count, because that typically means that there's not a ton of content on it, or that there's something larger technically broken. That's usually where I start, is looking at that just to see, where like quality content, quote unquote, could be. Of course, also looking for duplicated issues, but usually I start with just page word count. DeepCrawl does that, and that's usually an interesting way that you could look through, thousands and thousands of pages pretty quickly and say like, oh man, like I have 3,000 pages that only have like 20 words on it, and then you go to it and it's like a search result page, or it's some kind of random page that you didn't even know was on the site. So that's something where I would definitely start to look through that, and then go from there. Next question. Did you see a large switch in the search for ads at the bottom of the SERP moving to the top of the page? Not really. I mean, nothing more unusual than usual. Like I said, I still think that Google will eventually start to test out putting ads dispersed through the SERP. I'm still waiting for that. I still think that's going to happen at some point, but we didn't notice any major movement from the bottom to the top, any more ads at the top than there usually are, things of that nature. So I think that, I can't confirm seeing any more ads or any fewer ads. What I can say that we saw was an increase in shopping results. Not traditional pages, but the shopping results. So from Google Shopping, those definitely have come up more and more after this update. But again, that goes back to the more crowded SERPs. So I wouldn't be surprised if Google was trying to test something with more result types here. But nothing for traditional ads. And last question that I have time for in the last couple minutes. Anything specific about financial aggregate sites taking a hit with the May update? Or is it data you're seeing just showing that they took a hit in general? Great question. It's data that I'm seeing across. So I have aggregate views of certain types of sites in certain industries for certain indexes that we track within, Conductor's database. Going into specific sites, yes, I went into specific sites, but mostly just looking at the aggregate data together. Just showing that the overall percentage that was hit the hardest were larger aggregate sites that showed the largest dip in rankings overall. Going into specific sites without going into specifics of who I'm looking at, of course, it just looked like, again, it was just more of the deep level paginated pages. If you're looking, like you have a bunch of credit card type sites, and it's just like rows and rows and rows of different types of credit cards. A lot of those pages I saw fall out, and things like that. Again, it goes back to how deep and how thin those pages were. And that kind of goes back to that point. Those pages are thin. Those pages are kind of whatever at times. So that's something that we may see roll back. You never know. Usually these aggregator sites tend to jump back, especially some of the ones that I were looking for. They're not unknown sites. But at the same time, just in aggregate across financial, we saw a drop. But going into a few of the aggregators that we track, I saw that most of the pages that fell were those deeper level pages that just seemed to be likened to a search result page. And with that, everyone, we've done it once again. It is 2:30. My 30 minutes is up. Again, thank you so much for joining me. As always, I always feel very humbled by the attendance and the questions. This time I was happy you got to answer questions. I tried to make the less slides, so I had more time to answer questions. That's some feedback that I've gotten, so thank you again. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you again in 30 days. As I always say, this is my favorite part of my job, and I wouldn't be able to do it without all of you. So thank you for spending your very, very valuable time with me, and we will see you next month.